strange to be sat behind my drum kit for a YouTube video. My drums sit in the corner of my studio, and I turn up in the morning and I think, what shall I do today? I need to do a YouTube video, and I sit down the other end and I do the YouTube video. And I was just about to do one on Bill Bruford. And as I sat down, I looked at my drum kit and I thought, you know, that's sat in the corner, isn't it? Am I going to play it today? Didn't play it yesterday. In fact, I haven't played it for a week. In fact, I don't really have the motivation to play the drums at all. When I was a kid, it was like a curse. You know, I'd get up in the morning, get on my kit at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, start playing. I'd play for 2 or 3 hours. I'd be exhausted. I'd stop, get a drink of water, think, well, what shall I do today now? I've done that. And I found myself wandering back up. And the next thing I knew, I was playing for another 3 hours. I just couldn't stop. I did it all the time. I loved it. I could feel the compulsion in my body all the time to play the drums. And a good few years back now, that went. And I found myself more and more hating everything to do with music. I didn't want to listen to music. I didn't want to play the drums. When this YouTube channel started up, it was interesting because I was talking about music and I knew about it, and I could gush about my love for this music, which is totally genuine. But the idea I'd go and actually sit down and listen to this stuff, I wasn't listening to music. Now I am now. It's changed, and I'm playing a little bit more drums. This video is going to be about Bill Bruford's hiatus. When he got to 60 around about 2008, he packed the drums in, right? And recently he started back up again. And that's what this video is going to be about. It's going to be packing it in and starting back up again. I, as a teacher, have been in the business of motivating young people, getting them over their self-loathing, getting them organised, making them understand that they need to be creative and how they should be creative. And I know that stuff inside out. But this recent sort of demotivation I've had is a new thing to me. So it was very interesting to see the interview with Bill Bruford that was over on Making Weird Music, a great YouTube channel, and insightful chat, friendly, knowledgeable guy that does it, and also an adherence to the sort of music we talk about here. Great channel. And I was a little bit jealous that he got an interview with Bill Bruford, but he's got one. He's got an interview there, and he asked all the right questions. Me being a drummer, I would like to chat to Bill to get deeper into the drum side of it, but also to pursue this thing of this demotivation that comes in. And I think I know what it is. Anyway, here's a little clip from the interview. The link to the video is down below. Great channel, go and check it out, stick some likes and stuff on that. And if the guy from Making Weird Music does see this video, then I would love to come up and talk about all the weird music I've made and my opinions on weird music. So if he wants to come on this channel or me going in, I would love to do that. So I think that is an interesting thing when you cross over with other YouTubers. Anyway, here's the interview.
Around the age of 60, I thought, I've done 40 years of this and I'm very tired. Not tired in the sense I want to go to bed. It's tired in your very being, in your soul, you know, and you start to not enjoy music. Basically, you don't want to hear any music at all, let alone yourself play any. Around 2008, 2009, you know, 2007, a couple of years around there, I'm questioning it, and I've come off the back of a great fun with a Dutch guy, Michael Borslap, and we've done plenty of dates, improvising just piano and drums. Nothing wrong with it. I didn't have a drum tech. I really was tired with trying to find dates for the band and so forth. And I thought, I think 60 is a good time to stop. I like doing things like January the 1st. I'll stop then. But all I want to do is retire from or stop public performance, getting on stages. That was too much. I liked music. I wanted to study music, so I went to a university here in the UK, and did a doctorate in musicology. And that was fascinating in and of itself. But what was great about it was that I didn't have to call musicians. You know, I didn't have to write something for the bass player, that kind of thing, which really I think I'd had enough of. I was an academic writer it took me 5 or 6 years to get a degree. I was then an academic writer for another 4 or 5 years. That's usually pro bono work. You know, mostly academics write stuff for other people, and there's not much in it. You usually get rewarded, as is in the Deresovich book, actually, by the university in terms of preferment in your employment. You get more money and so forth. I was not employed at the university. I was a PhD graduate. So that was fine, but heavy lifting. Academic work is not easygoing. You try writing a couple of chapters for the Cambridge Companion to Percussion, and it's going to make you sweat. So that was okay. And then all this time, I'd had a drum kit just kind of sitting in my study, you know, and I'd walk past it every morning and say hi, you know, and then I'd walk back past it in the evening, going back into the main house and say goodnight, you know, and in no time did I feel the slightest inkling to play it. And that would be about 9, 10 years, maybe 12 years. And then one day, a whole lot of things you know how they say there's seven things all align for a disaster to happen.
I've only heard 3s, so 7's quite generous.
You know, the pilot didn't read the weather forecast. The landing gear didn't work. You know, the thing was iced up. It all happened. There's probably 7 things that happen all at once for a great, successful and happy occasion to occur. And there were the drums, and there was this guy, Pete Roth, and there was a rehearsal room down the road, and someone said, why don't you do this? And another guy said, we could play together, you know, I'm around, and that kind of stuff. And a whole pack of cards kind of fell together rather than fell apart, sort of fell together. And before I knew it, there I was trying hard to play again.
What Bill describes there is something that I have had for, like, I would say for about 20 years now. Let's chat a little bit about Bill Bruford, and then I will get onto this subject, because part of this is another opportunity for me to pay tribute to Bill Bruford. So at the top of this video, I was sat behind my kit and I improvised a little bit of a solo, which was based around a drum beat that Bill Bruford does on the King Crimson track, Easy Money. And it's got a trademark thing that Bruford did back then, which is this sort of overriding hi-hat against a odd time signature. It's in 7. And the hi-hat is going... So not overriding is when you have this rhythm that goes across. Neil Peart did it a lot. The guys from Dream Theater do it a lot. Vinnie Colaiuta does it on the tune 7 Days by Sting. Here's Bruford doing it back in 73. Obviously, he was continually innovating. He was continually thinking about ways of changing his drumming so that he would seem an individual. That's what it seemed. And watching the interview with him, he was quite conscious about that. A sort of English thoughtfulness where it's more considered, I suppose. And in being more considered, the consideration is about trying to create your own sound. The virtuosity of the American players is undoubtable. American players have such chops. Their education system is better than ours for music, I think, for popular music. Plus, they're playing rhythm and blues and soul and funk and all that stuff, which is their culture. So the American players are incredible players. If you look at the American jazz fusion players, they're all unbelievable. If you look at the British progressive rock players, of which Bill Bruford is right at the top echelon of those, what you have is something else. What you have is great big globs of individuality. If you say Phil Collins or you say Bill Bruford, you say Carl Palmer, those three drummers are absolutely, completely different in their sound. If you think of Steve Howe or Steve Hackett or Robert Fripp, these are all individuals, and we can picture them. Rick Wakeman, Keith Emerson, Ian Anderson. Every one of these is unique in every single way, and I think that's interesting. That the British musicians, by being more considered, are also more individual. I think that's a reasonable thing. Now, of course, if you are very considered, you also go into the realm of perfectionism, anal retentiveness, and that's also a feature of British progressive rock. And I don't like that so much. I like the sort of let's play by your seat of your pants approach. Now, Bruford has never fallen into that. He was always a jazz musician. He was always an improviser. The first progressive rock band I ever heard was Yes on the Yes album. And I was very impressed with the band overall. I thought Bruford's drumming was very interesting. Then I was reading Kerrang, which was a magazine on heavy metal that we had here in the UK. And it had sort of, I think it was the 5 must listen to drummers, which was like, probably at that time, it was like John Bonham, I think, was in there. Ian Pace was in there. I don't even think Neil Peart, this is right back in the early 80s. A list of rock drummers you should listen to. And Bill Bruford was in there, and I recognised the name. And the album that they said to go listen to was the debut Yes album, and especially the track, I See You. I think it's called that. I See You, la 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 la. Lovely track. So I went and bought that album. Now, for many Yes fans, this is so unlike proper Yes, more like a Beatlesy, Birdsy, vocal harmony, hippie band. But Bruford's drumming was a revelation to me, and what he was doing with his left hand. Now, people can call this jazz drumming, but there's a precision to the way Bruford plays, which is completely different to listening to Kenny Clarke or Philly Joe Jones, although he's close to my ears to a drummer like Max Roach. Anyway, as I learned more about music and I started to hear some of the British jazz drummers that were working in the 1960s, there was a number of drummers that, for me, had a very similar approach to their sound. And there was a British jazz drummer called Alan Ganley. And Alan Ganley cropped up on the television quite a lot on the sort of Jazz 625 programs, backing up people like Bob Brookmeyer and stuff like that. And I felt that he had a certain precision. So in my mind, I always thought Bruford sort of come out of the British drummers like Alan Ganley. Now, how many guys that were rock fans in the early 1980s knew this information? But I seem to know this. And I was listening to Alan Ganley, I was listening to Bruford. Now, I believe that Bruford, before he joined, even though he joined at like 20 years old when he joined Yes, he was actually in Savoy Brown. Now, Savoy Brown were a blues band that were playing a lot of 6/8 stuff, and 6/8 stuff allows you to do a lot of polyrhythmical things. Bruford, right in the late 60s, had an interest in polyrhythms, and he had an interest in timing, more than your jazz drummer would normally have. Anyway, he gets the gig with Savoy Brown, and I think he gets the push because he was basically, taking that 6/8 a little too far. And then the perfect storm happens. Bruford talks about this in the interview on Making Weird Music. He joins Yes, and John Anderson has a vision. And so although they're writing sort of standard poppy rock songs at that point, albeit, quite over-arranged, John Anderson is quite happy to let Bill Bruford divide the beat up in every shape or form. Now, in rock music, Stuart Copeland came along in the late 70s, early 80s. He started to do the same thing. He started to stick his backbeats all in over in the wrong place. And he was a legend for doing this. And I love Stuart Copeland, and he was one of my first favourite drummers. But Bruford is that times 10. Bruford always was searching for a new way of playing the drums, always. And he always had a deep respect for improvisation. Putting all that together, he is a superstar drummer in one of the biggest bands. But it wasn't for him to go away and trawl his past like Carl Palmer has with his, ELP band that he travels around. or carry on in that vein, trying to do something like they did with Asia or what Yes did later on. Bruford was never interested in that. He was always too left field. I mean, he leaves Yes in 72 to join King Crimson, and in terms of the stature of bands, he's dropping down there. You know, and by the late 70s, he uses his notoriety as a progressive rock musician to form the band Bruford. Now, I have to say, one of a kind for me. Is one of the greatest, jazz, fusion, prog albums of the late 1970s. It's greater, in my mind, than the UK album that he also played on. By the time he gets to the 1980s, he's utilising the sort of royalty fees he's getting from these Yes albums that have sold millions to support his, the bad habit he's got, which is wanting to play jazz. He does the Earthworks things. He does some incredible, piano improvisation albums with Patrick Moraz. But he gets into a situation, and I remember reading an interview with this, and he was moaning because if he's booked to do a drum clinic, he said, now, back in the old days, I did a lot of drum clinics. I was sort of the UK master clinician demoer for Tama. Bruford was signed to Tama. And so when they brought one of the big league guys over, like Mike Portnoy, or maybe it'd be Simon Phillips, I would be there opening up for these guys. And I got to play at Drumfest in 2005, which was a roster of some of the biggest drummers in the world. I was the first on the bill, the lowest. But it meant I was playing alongside Terry Bozzio and Thomas Lang and Greg Bisnet and Jimmy Chamberlain for Smashing Pumpkins. And that event Bruford came to, and he was backstage, and I had a long conversation with him, which he probably can't remember, about music and philosophy. But I did have my mate Big John, who got the name Big John because he's called John and he's massive. And he has, in the centre of his back, a huge tattoo of the sun and the moon off Lark's Tongues in Aspic. And I made him take his shirt off, exposing this vast body to Bill Bruford, which I don't think he was too impressed with. And then about a month later, I was doing a signing session at one of the drum events. I wasn't playing, but I'd been brought in. At that point, I was doing a lot of clinics. A lot of kids knew me. And I did the signing session, sat next to Bill Bruford, and I had another chat to him. So I've met Bill and I've talked to him. He's a lovely man, very intelligent, very affable, but very thoughtful, an incredible player. Anyway, around about this time, I don't know whether he told me this when we met, but I have it in my mind that he said that if he did a drum clinic, he would have 300, 400 people turn up for the drum clinic. And that was the case before the internet. Drum clinics were huge. In 2000, I did a clinic tour with Simon Phillips. And the first clinic we had about 800 in. The second clinic we had 1,500 in. And then the third clinic, I think we had 1,000 in. And those three clinics I did with Simon, basically about 5,000 drummers saw me, and I came out of that known in the UK because all these drummers had seen me play with Simon. That's how big the clinic thing was. Whereas if Bruford went out with one of his jazz groups, then he was in the same boat as every other jazz group and playing small jazz groups, jazz clubs for virtually no money, and having to put the money in himself. And this means sticking the car in a kit. Like, you can't afford a drum tech, you can't afford all the stuff that Bruford was used to in the 70s. You basically have to stick a small kit into the back of your car, carry it into a venue, and all that type of stuff. And Bruford, because he was committed to the art, was doing all that. Well, I tell you something, when you're in that realm, it's depressing. And the same thing with me. In 1997, I joined Robert Plant's band. I stayed with him for about 3 years. And I was being chauffeured, driven around, having luxury hotels, playing 26,000-seater venues, not having to set my kit up, just waltzing up, putting my nice shirt on and walking onto a stage, then walking off, and getting drunk and chatting to people whilst the minions sorted it all away and put it all away. And then I came out of that. I had basically a breakdown coming out of Robert's band because I'd never been in that situation before. And slowly realised that I wanted to play stuff that was more left field. I ended up playing progressive rock, and then I realised I was more left field than even progressive rock. And again, so many projects, so much money pushed into things, organising gigs in Europe, but knowing that the fee's not there for you to earn. The fee is there to try and stretch to get the band in a venue. And the thing is, it starts to be depressing. You start to see the world, you start to see the reality of the situation. And also, I think there's a point, most musicians who are successful, if they've been lucky to be successful in any shape or form, by the time they're 27 and 28, they have done the peak. That's it. And so they either stop playing or they keep going and bang their head against diminishing returns. And this is what I wanted to talk about. In a way, my life's been blessed, and I spent a lot of the time playing in gigs, playing with people I loved, playing with musicians I respected, having incredible experiences on stage, and it was all wonderful. But if you take your meaning of life in terms of looking at what everyone else had at that time, which was nice houses and holidays and security, I never had that. And it's incredible that people like Bill Bruford, legends that changed the shape of music, don't have that. They don't have it. And when you rock up in some little club somewhere and you're playing there and the audience come in and then you chat to them at the bar, they think that you're getting paid so much money for doing this. A lot of the people who love this music, when I got into progressive rock, were older guys, and some of them were very, very well off. They were lawyers and solicitors or whatever, doctors. And every now and then, I'd become friendly with them. They were friends with a progressive rock band I was in, for example, and I'd say, well, why don't you come to one of the gigs? Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, if you come along, you can help me with my drums in and, and all that type of stuff. Yeah, let's do that. And so you'd meet this doctor, stick him in the back of a van, drive for 4 hours, carrying a ton of gig upstairs, set it all up, be stuck in a toilet, have no food, have nowhere to change, wait around for 4 or 5 hours, go on stage, play the gig, be knackered, try and get it all back in the back of the van, get back in the van at 2 o'clock in the morning, then spend 4 hours driving home. And I can remember some guy I was with, he was driving back and he was knackered. He was going, oh my God, what time is it? I said, look, mate, don't even think about it. You're going to get back at 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh my God. Well, it's the weekend. Have you got to get up tomorrow? Well, no, but it's going to knock me out. Oh, well, just accept the fact that you're going to be knocked out. That's it. I was one of these people, when I had kids, I had a baby, didn't bother me about the lack of sleep because I'd been in bands touring. It was just, oh, well, I've had 2 hours sleep last night. That's fine. I'll be all right with 2 hours. And this guy turned around to me and he says, how much are you getting for this gig? And I said, well, I'm getting 80 quid. He went, really? He went, yeah, when you take the expenses off a bit, it's 100 quid. But I said, well, I'm going to have in my hand at home because I haven't spent anything. I've tried to eat the food they provided. It's 80 quid. The bloke could not believe it. He said, I thought you would be on about 500 quid. No. I can remember a bunch of these guys they were like lawyers. They decided to form a band. They weren't pro musicians. And they formed this band. And then one of the lawyers said, well, my daughter's getting married. Do you want to play their wedding? And they played their wedding. And when I saw them, I said, how'd the gig go? They went, really good. I said, did you get paid? He went, oh, yeah, we got paid. I said, how much? And he went, 500 quid. And I went, what, 500 quid for the band? I mean, you just formed this band and your band's pulling 500 quid. And this guy went, no, 500 quid each. And I said, that's unbelievable. And this lawyer said, well, we didn't really know how much it would be. We had a conversation. We thought that you guys must be at least on 500 to 1,000 quid a gig. I was just, no. Really, because I was playing in a really famous band. He was a fan of that band, IQ, Frost. And it's incredible how people don't understand the reality of the situation. Now, obviously, I don't want to make this about downloading and streaming and the way the music industry has changed so much that the old way of playing an instrument and making albums and making your profit out of that, which has gone. Although I don't know whether it's 100% gone. This is the thing. But I have knocked my head against this brick wall, and it gets to a point where you're trying to play. You are having to travel across the country to get into a rehearsal to rehearse. You're going away on tour, you've got 3 dates and you've got 1 day to rehearse. So you're in a rehearsal room and you're just basically trying to remind yourself how the stuff goes. You're playing difficult music. So you've sort of got it down. Then you go out, you play the stuff. The first gig's pretty awful because you really are not rehearsed up. The second gig, it starts to come together. By the time you go back home, you're just feeling like you've got into it. You haven't played well. The music didn't sound that great. You've lost money. You're tired, right? You haven't got the budgets to play your own drums, so you're playing borrowed drum kits. They haven't got your sound. You can't really focus on what is going on. The effect of this over the years of being in this, plus this idea of not being able to do creative work, of being always restricted by the fan base. The fan base, even for experimental music, wants a certain thing, and they can't deal with you going outside the realm. That's totally understandable. And I understand the fans being like that, but it's frustrating, you know. I had spent a lot of time, because I basically got so fed up with all this that in 2008, 2009, I just knocked it all on the head. I was 40, 41 then. I settled down and had kids. Why? Well, I could see the bottom dropping out of the album thing. The money for the gigs was getting less. The albums were being, you know, there was torrent files of every album we made, so that we weren't making any money out of them. The audience couldn't deal with anything but being given exactly what they wanted. I found that very frustrating. And I felt in what they wanted, there were some incredible things they wanted, but there was also a lack of creativity in what they wanted, and that was very frustrating as well. I then moved towards improvised music, and of course nobody wants to listen to that at all. So in 2008, 2009, I knocked it on the head. When I got lured back in, because I missed it and I wanted to play, I'd had about 2 or 3 years of not playing, and I was quite happy not to play. I then had to get back to playing again, and I never really got back. I never got back that thing of wanting to play. And this is now 20 years later. Sometimes when I sit down and play, I'm in physical pain, and it's not because I'm injured or anything like that. It's how much my body does not want to play the drums. And I think it comes from the delicate thing that I had as a youngster that made me play the drums and made me make music, was now being interfered with too much knowledge, too much awareness of how the industry works. And Bruford has this in buckets way more than even I do. And I wonder whether that knowledge gives you a resignation. You give yourself, I can't get my words out here. You're resigned to this great, desperate sigh. And you can knuckle down and try and do it, right? But there's something of banging your head against a brick wall with all this. When I started and I came back to it, and I formed a number of progressive rock bands. The first one I formed was a band called, oh my God, don't forget your own band now. This is terrible, isn't it? I mean, we made an album called Sign of Four, which is the name of the album. What was the name of the? It was a funny name, wasn't it? Kiyama. That was a band. Massive amount of effort writing the material, rehearsing it, going down to real world, recording it not working out, having to redo that again. And eventually this album came out, and the album did quite well. The fan base started to emerge, and then one of the guys didn't want to really do it anymore, and somebody had stage fright, and they didn't, and all this, the whole thing collapses around you. And so here I am, many years later, and I love the Kiyama album, but obviously, like that old lady in Lady Killers that doesn't like her umbrella, so she keeps leaving it somewhere. There's something about, when I think back to it, it was the amount of effort we put in, and how great the music is, and yet it was just so hard. I formed a band with Dick Burke called Brave New Sky, and that crashed and burned. I've more recently formed a band, Rain. We managed to get 2 albums out before that crashed and burned. The amount of effort that I have put into these things continually. When somebody rings me up now to form a band, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm trying my best, but to me, I know exactly what's going to happen. I see the signs as soon as you start. You know, musicians, the paranoia of musicians, the investment that they put into it, and then how they react when it doesn't pay off. You know, the idea that a lot of musicians think that all they got to do is make the music, put the album out, and then they're done, and if you're motivated to get to the album, that motivation that gets you there, then you believe that it will carry on, and it doesn't. I'm a bit of a philosophical type. So I was teaching music this whole time. And so I was really trying to get my head around how it worked. And I was aware of the change. And eventually I realized that the creative place to be was not making music in a band and making albums. It was being on YouTube. And I realized that in the same way musicians had to shift from playing saxophone and being a reader in a big band to, you know, wearing a talent suit and playing like Beatles type R&B. That shift that happened in the 60s, that's had to happen now. And you chat to a lot of musicians and they don't want to do it. I don't want to be an influencer. I don't want to be a t-shirt salesman. I just want to be able to make my creative music, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to be doing what you're doing on YouTube. I understand that, but the thing has changed. It's changed. So here I am making a video in response to Bruford's interview about all this. And what I haven't talked about is his comeback, which is very interesting. But I just want to express this phenomenon of being a late middle-aged musician and how demoralizing it can be, and how too many years of that can really switch off your love for it. Well, my love has come back from it. My love for actual music never really went. The one thing that never went was my love of making music. Throughout the whole time I made music. Sometimes it was with programmed drums, whatever. But if you go onto my Bandcamp and look at that period of time, outside the bands I was in, I was making albums. I've made 50 albums. And as time's gone on, I've been able to see how that relates to YouTube, and how I haven't just utilized YouTube to have, you know, like many other music YouTubers, a place where I can talk about my 10 favorite albums or do this or interview that. I have from day one been, you know, trying to find different ways of shoehorning my creativity into it. And when it works, suddenly you've got thousands and thousands of people responding to it, but the creativity has to be reframed. So at the top of this video, I played the drums. I played it in the style of Bill Bruford. It's camera phone audio, although I'll EQ it a little bit in the video editor, but it is basically camera phone audio. It wasn't planned. This is one of the things I love to do. Improvised music, the sort of stuff Bruford loves, it really works on YouTube. It's a great place, you know, when people can see that you're making something up and they can see your face and the fight, they find that story interesting. When I was playing that, I didn't feel happy. I wasn't in a flow state. I could hear and feel things not quite right. You know, I had done a little bit of practice for the last few weeks, and I felt my playing had got back, and then life takes over and I couldn't get to practice, and I haven't played for a week or so. I sit back on the drums. I'm back to square one. It's all so difficult. I wish I could come on here like I do when I talk to younger musicians or creative musicians or musicians who haven't been able to find a creative outlet and give them advice. The advice for myself? Well, the conclusion I came up to is if I wanted to play the drums, it would have to be a part of YouTube. If I had to play the drums for YouTube, then it might make me play drums. So I set up a thing called... within my membership, there's a lower paid membership, which is the lack of confidence in the product I'm giving out, you know, called For the Drummers. And so twice a week I'll come in here and do an impromptu drum lesson for the drummers. I had planned to do one today, and I have to be honest, I sat down, I thought, because of the fight of just trying to get the drums back, trying to get my head back into it. I know I can get back. And I know when I'm playing well, I can play. The other day, I turned up here and a different thought popped into my head. For a few moments, I felt like an individual. That inspiration that I had when I first heard Bill Bruford, which I've left to the end of this video, because what did Bruford do for me? He did something for me that no other drummer did. When I heard him, he sounded different. And it wasn't that snare drum. It was also the cymbals. It was that trashy cymbal on the red. He was interested in sounds, and while I was doing this guy was turning up on mainstream television, showing off his Simmons drum kit. I bought the Simmons drum kit. He made me realise that one of the keys to drumming was how you sounded, and the sound that your sound, it was in your hands. It's very interesting that when in this interview he was asked if he had any hand problems and stuff like this. He has not hit the drummer's menopause. The reason is because Bruford's technique is flawless. And if you see the classic rock era drummers like Phil Collins, Carl Palmer and all those, Bruford has absolutely flawless technique. That doesn't mean he can play the complex thing. That's not what technique is. Technique is the ability to pull the sound out of the drums. And he's got that in bucket loads. He knows how to get the sound out of the drums. And that was something I wanted. But what was brilliant about Bruford was he owned that sound. He said something in that interview that I got from him as a sort of 12, 13-year-old drummer. And it was, you could love Max Roach, you could love Elvin Jones, you could love John Bonham, you could love Stuart Copeland or Vinnie Colaiuta or Telly Bozio or even Bill Bruford, right? But trying to emulate them note for note is pointless. What you can do is try and do it your way. And you might feel like you're bluffing, but that bluffing is actually, or it develops into your individuality. That was what I got from Bill Bruford, and I thank him so much for that. And a week or so ago, and I've been practicing and playing, I've been getting back into the flow, and for an instant, I felt back in that place. Not measuring myself against other drummers or thinking about failure. I have that feeling of thinking, I'm okay. I'm Andy Edwards. That's who I sound like. That's what I do. If people want it, they could have it. If they don't want it, it doesn't matter. But I can hold my head up high and know that I do what I do. And it's okay. And for an instant, I felt in the right place. And so it might be that what I need to do is, rather than being influenced by Bruford as I was as a kid into the way he played and knowing this lick and that lick, and maybe I've got to go to that thing in Bruford that all the truly great drummers have, which is the ability for them to motivate you and make you want to be an individual. And I think as I get to the end of this video, and I have now considered that interview and what I watched it this morning, that is what I've got from it. I've just analysed it before your eyes. Not you, me, Andy Edwards, needs to just pursue the thing that is you. And the thing that is you now in the 21st century, that means not just letting go of what other drummers do and all that type of thing, which you were able to do at 13, 14. But it could be that it is my own legacy as a drummer, which is all in my head. I have no real legacy in reality. I've got to let go. Bruford said this in this interview, that he had to learn to let go of that and allow the Bruford to come out. The Bruford doesn't have to be made to come out. It's not in his snare sound. The man's got a lot to say still about the drums. It's not about chops. It's not the fact he's the greatest progressive rock drummer of all time, although he is probably in the top 3. It's nothing about that. Bruford has something to offer for musicians like me, which is so much more than just the way he sounds or the way he plays. I'll have to go out and see him. I've got to go and see his band. I've got to see what he's up to now. And I hope I've done the email out this morning to the information email that's on his site. But if anyone's got a contact here, I would love to interview Bruford. It's not just to get views and have him on my channel. Interviews never do that well. I need to talk to the guy. I feel I need to talk to Bill Bruford at the moment. I need to talk to him. I need to ask him questions, not to try and get a good interview. I genuinely need to pick his brains. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.